He called you a NR, then wiped the rim of your glass with his crotch. Those words, scribbled in frantic, jagged letters on a cocktail napkin, were more than an insult. They were a declaration of war. They landed on the table with the quiet devastation of a bomb, stopping billionaire CEO Elias Vance dead in his tracks. The glass of vintage Bordeaux, a wine he knew was worth more than the car he'd driven here in, froze halfway to his lips. For a man who had navigated hostile takeovers and shattered glass ceilings, a man who could kill $1 billion deal with a single raised eyebrow, this was a different kind of violence. This wasn't a boardroom play. This wasn't market strategy. This was raw, primal, and deeply personal. And it was about to detonate into a story of filth and fury that would burn an institution to the ground. Before we dive into the absolute depravity of what happened next, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You're not going to want to miss the stories we tell here, the ones that peel back the polished veneer of society to show the rot underneath. Now, take a deep breath, because the story of the Gilded Cage is about to get ugly, and you need to be ready for the blast. Elias Vance hadn't come to Savannah, Georgia for the fine dining. He came for the truth, disguised in a faded black hoodie, worn-out jeans, and a pair of scuffed work boots that had seen better days. He was a ghost in his own machine. He had quietly acquired a majority stake in a portfolio of luxury hospitality venues 6 months prior, and the Gilded Cage was its crown jewel. Tucked away on a historic square, it was famed for its Michelin stars and its centuries-old oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. But whispers had reached his New York office through a burner email. Whispers of discriminatory practices, of a toxic kitchen culture, and of a traditional atmosphere that felt more like a Confederate monument than a modern restaurant. The email was from a former employee, too scared to use their name. It spoke of 2 sets of rules, one for the wealthy, white clientele, and another for everyone else. Elias didn't send a team of auditors. He didn't dispatch an HR representative with a clipboard and a checklist. When you want to know if a snake is venomous, you don't send a rabbit. You go yourself, and you let it try to bite you. So he bought a bus ticket, not a first-class flight. He checked into a cheap motel, not the penthouse suite. He walked into the Gilded Cage that Tuesday night alone. No reservation, no entourage, no name. From the second he pushed open the heavy, ornate doors, he could feel it. The whispers weren't just whispers, they were the house policy. The hostess, a blonde woman whose smile was as tight and artificial as her pearl necklace, looked him up and down not as a potential customer, but as a potential problem. Her eyes lingered on his hoodie, the slight fray at the cuffs of his jeans. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with a politeness so forced it was practically an insult. "A table for one," Elias said, his voice level, calm. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on her tablet, a slow, deliberate performance of inconvenience. "We're quite booked this evening. I might have something at the bar, or perhaps by the service entrance." The choice was clear. Be seen with the drunks, or be hidden with the trash. "The service entrance is fine," Elias replied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. This was exactly what he'd come for. He followed her through the main dining room, a cavern of hushed conversations, clinking silverware, and the soft glow of candlelight. He passed tables of laughing white couples and families, their wealth as obvious as the diamonds on their fingers. There wasn't another black person in the entire room, except for a busboy clearing plates with his head down, moving as if he was trying to apologize for his own existence. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax, old money, and an unspoken history. The walls were adorned with oil paintings of stern-faced men, the city's founding fathers, men who had built their fortunes on the backs of people who looked just like him. They stared down at him, their painted eyes cold and judging. The hostess deposited him at a small, wobbly table tucked into an alcove next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time they burst open, he was hit with a blast of noise and the acrid smell of industrial cleaner. She dropped a menu onto the table without a word and vanished. No water, no bread service, just a clear, unspoken message. You are not welcome here. Elias sat back, a master of patience. He was 48 years old, the CEO of Vance Capital, a self-made titan who had clawed his way up from the dirt floors of rural Mississippi. He had been raised by a grandfather who taught him that silence was a weapon, that observation was a superpower. He remembered, with a clarity that still burned, being a small boy, holding his father's hand as they entered a department store to buy his mother a birthday present. He'd watched as the white sales clerk ignored his father, serving 3 other customers who had arrived after them. He remembered the shame and rage that coiled in his father's posture, the way his hand had tightened on his, the way he had forced a smile and said, "It's all right, son. We'll come back another time." They never did. Success hadn't erased those memories. It had only sharpened them. Now he lived in a Manhattan penthouse with a view that could make gods feel small. He sat on boards, moved markets, and his name commanded respect in rooms where his grandfather wouldn't have been allowed to serve water. But he never forgot the sting of being made to feel invisible. And as he sat at that forgotten table in his own restaurant, he felt that old sting again. The manager, a man with silver hair and a condescending smirk named Mr. Sterling, glided through the dining room, schmoozing with regulars, his laughter echoing off the high ceilings. His gaze swept right past Elias, as if he were a piece of furniture. It was perfect. The system wasn't just broken, it was meticulously, flawlessly executing its prejudiced design. And Elias Vance, the invisible man, was taking notes. He was a predator who had disguised himself as prey, and the trap was about to spring. Isabella Flores, or Izzy as her friends called her, moved through the controlled chaos of the gilded cage with an economy of motion that spoke of exhaustion. At 23, she had the weary eyes of someone twice her age. She hadn't dreamed of being a waitress. Her dream was to be an investigative journalist, to write stories that mattered, stories that exposed the kinds of truths that festered in places like this. She'd been a star student at the University of Georgia on a full scholarship when a phone call had shattered her world. Her father, a lifelong construction worker, had fallen from a scaffold. The accident hadn't killed him, but it had broken his body, leaving him unable to work and buried under a mountain of medical debt. Izzy dropped out of school. She moved back home to Savannah to take care of him and her younger sister, and she took the first job that offered decent tips, a server position at the Gilded Cage. The money was a lifeline, but the price was a piece of her soul every single shift. She was one of only 2 Hispanic servers on staff, and she felt the subtle, persistent chill of being an outsider. Mr. Sterling, the manager, called her Isabelle, with an exaggerated French pronunciation that felt like a mockery. Chef Antoine, the notoriously temperamental head chef, barked at her in a mix of broken English and culinary French, his compliments reserved for the white servers he favored. She was consistently assigned the worst sections, the tables known for tipping poorly, the ones near the noisy kitchen, or the drafty entrance. She learned to wear her smile like a suit of armor. She said, "Yes, sir," and "Of course, ma'am," until the words lost all meaning. She balanced trays, poured $1,000 bottles of wine, and bit her tongue so often she could taste blood. But behind the polite facade, the journalist in her was always awake, watching, listening, cataloging the quiet injustices, The way black couples were always told the patio was fully committed, even on a slow night. The way the kitchen staff used racial slurs in Spanish, thinking she wouldn't understand. The way Mr. Sterling would forget to add her to the tip pool for large parties. She wasn't just surviving, she was gathering evidence. But for what? Who would ever listen to a waitress? Tonight, though, was different. The man at table 22, the one shoved into the forgotten corner, didn't fit. He wasn't loud or demanding. He didn't flash a watch or a credit card. He just sat there, still and silent, his gaze sweeping the room with an unnerving intelligence. When her section partner refused to take the table, muttering something about a waste of time, Izzy picked up her notepad. She approached him, forcing the professional smile onto her face. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you off with something to drink?" He looked up, and for the first time all night someone actually saw her. His eyes weren't dismissive. They were analytical, direct, and tired. They held a depth she recognized. It was the look of someone who knew what it was like to be underestimated. "Yes," he said, his voice a low, steady baritone. "I'll have a bottle of the 98 Chateau Margaux." Izzy's pen froze over the paper. The 98 Margaux. It was one of the most expensive wines on their list, a staggering $900 a bottle. She had worked here for over a year and had only seen it ordered once by a senator celebrating his re-election. She glanced at the man's hoodie, his worn boots. Panic flared in her chest. The house rule was clear. For any order over $500 from a questionable patron, the server had to discreetly ask for a credit card to be held. It was a humiliating policy, one she had always hated. If she didn't ask, and he walked out, the cost would be docked from her pay. It would take her weeks to earn that back. "An excellent choice, sir," she stammered. She could feel Mr. Sterling's eyes on her from across the room. She knew what he was expecting her to do. The man's gaze sharpened slightly. "Is there a problem?" he asked, not aggressively, but with a quiet challenge. Something inside her snapped, a tiny rebellion. Screw the policy, screw Sterling. She met his eyes. "No, sir, not at all. I'll have that right out for you." As she walked away, her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt Sterling's glare like a physical weight on her back. When she put the wine order into the system, it beeped, requiring a manager's override. Sterling strode over, his face a mask of contempt. "Did you get a card from him?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "No, sir," Izzy said, her own voice barely a whisper. "Then you better pray he's good for it, Isabel," he sneered, jabbing his code into the keypad. "Because if he's not, that's coming out of your hide." Izzy didn't flinch. She just nodded and went to the wine cellar. She had a feeling, a wild, inexplicable gut instinct, that the man at table 22 wasn't a risk. He was an answer, and if she was right, he was about to see exactly what kind of cage he was sitting in. The kitchen at the Gilded Cage was a pressure cooker of arrogance and animosity, and Chef Antoine was its tyrannical king. He was a culinary darling, celebrated in magazines for his innovative take on Southern classics. But in his own domain, he was a petty, racist bully. Izzy had seen him throw plates, scream obscenities, and humiliate busboys for the smallest infractions. But what she saw tonight went beyond his usual cruelty. After Elias ordered the wine, he followed up with an order for the governor's cut, a 50-ounce tomahawk steak, dry-aged for 120 days, served with a black truffle and bone marrow butter. The price tag was an audacious $850. It was a dish designed to scream, "I have money." When Izzy delivered the order to the kitchen, Chef Antoine glanced at the ticket, then looked through the porthole window of the kitchen door toward Elias's table. A slow, ugly smirk spread across his face. "The governor's cut, for him," he said in French to his sous chef, a man who mirrored his boss's bigotry. "The monkey thinks he's a king." The sous chef snickered. Izzy, who was fluent in Spanish and had taken 4 years of French in high school, felt a hot spike of rage. She stood frozen by the pass, pretending to check other tickets, but her ears were ringing. She watched as Antoine seared the magnificent cut of beef, moving with the theatrical flair he was famous for. Then, just as he was about to plate it, he did something that made her blood run cold. He turned his back to the door, leaned over the steak, and hawked a thick glob of spit directly onto the sizzling meat. He then nonchalantly spooned the truffle butter over it, hiding the vile act. He turned back, a triumphant glint in his eye. But he wasn't done. He grabbed the wine glass that was destined for Elias's table. With a disgusting leer at his sous chef, he unzipped his pants slightly, took the glass, and rubbed the rim against his crotch. Then he placed it on the tray next to the steak. "Voila," he sneered. "Service for a king." The kitchen staff who saw it either laughed nervously or looked away, their silence a form of complicity. Izzy felt like she was going to be sick. This wasn't just unsanitary. It was a ritual of humiliation. It was a violent act of racial hatred disguised as a meal. For a moment, she was paralyzed by fear. If she said anything, she'd be fired on the spot. Antoine would deny everything. Sterling would back him up. She'd be blacklisted from every restaurant in the city. Her father's medical bills flashed in her mind, her sister's school tuition. But then she saw Elias's face again in her mind's eye, the quiet dignity in his posture, the intelligence in his gaze. He wasn't just some customer, he was a witness, and he didn't even know it yet. She had to warn him. But how? She couldn't make a scene. She couldn't refuse to serve the food. That would get her fired before she could do anything. Her hand dove into her apron pocket, her fingers closing around the cheap ballpoint pen she carried. Her eyes darted around, landing on a stack of clean cocktail napkins. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely write. The words came out in a desperate scrawl. "He called you a N.R., then wiped the rim of your glass with his crotch. He spit on your steak. They do this. This place is poison. Check the security cameras. They think they're erased." She didn't sign it. There was no time. The expediter was already calling her name, gesturing impatiently at the plated steak under its silver cloche. "Table 22. Let's go, Isabel." With her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, she folded the napkin into a tiny square and palmed it. She picked up the heavy tray, her face a carefully constructed mask of professional neutrality. She walked the long path back to table 22, each step feeling like a mile. The world seemed to slow down. The laughter and chatter of the dining room faded into a dull roar. There was only the tray, the note, and the man waiting in the shadows. She placed the massive platter in front of him. "The governor's cut, sir," she said, her voice miraculously steady. As she lifted the silver dome with her right hand to reveal the steak, her left hand moved like a phantom, slipping the folded napkin directly under the edge of his water glass. The movement was so small, so swift, it was almost imperceptible. She then picked up his empty bread plate and turned away without making eye contact. She was gone before he could even register what had happened. She didn't look back. She just walked toward the restrooms, her legs trembling, praying that she hadn't just destroyed her entire life for nothing. Elias sat motionless. He hadn't seen the note at first. He had only registered the flicker of something in Izzy's eyes as she served him. A spark of fear, of warning. It was a look he knew well. It was the look of the oppressed signaling to a potential ally in a room full of enemies. It told him to be careful. He let his gaze drift down and saw it. The small white square of folded paper, tucked discreetly under his glass. It didn't belong. It was a disruption in the carefully orchestrated performance of fine dining. With a deliberate, unhurried motion, he picked up the napkin and unfolded it in his lap, below the level of the table. He read the jagged, desperate words once, then twice. A cold, surgical rage began to build inside him, a pressure behind his eyes that was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't the spit or the vile act with the glass that shocked him. He had known, on some level, that he would find something rotten here. No, what seized him was the raw courage of the words, the sheer, insane bravery of the person who had written them. This waitress, this young woman with tired eyes and worn-out shoes, had just risked her entire livelihood, her ability to pay her rent, to eat, to survive, on the hope that a total stranger in a hoodie would believe her and do something about it. She hadn't just written a warning. She had handed him a weapon and trusted him to know how to use it. His father's face flashed in his mind again. The humiliation in the department store, the forced smile, the quiet retreat. His father had endured it to protect him, but Elias was not his father. He was not a boy anymore, and he would not retreat. Not now. Not ever. He carefully folded the napkin and slipped it into the inside pocket of his hoodie, a piece of evidence that felt as heavy as a block of gold. He pushed the untouched plate of food away. He didn't summon the manager. He didn't raise his voice. That would be a performance, and he was done watching theater. He stood up, his movements fluid and precise, and began walking toward the front of the restaurant. Mr. Sterling intercepted him near the host stand, his face arranged in a mask of solicitous concern. "Sir, is everything all right with your meal?" he asked, his eyes flicking to the barely touched, exorbitant steak on the table. He was already calculating the loss. "Everything is not all right," Elias said, his voice quiet but carrying a new, hard edge. "I need to speak with you. In your office. Now." Sterling's professional smile faltered. He was used to placating angry customers, not being commanded by them. Still, fearing a scene, he gestured stiffly toward a hallway. "Of course, sir. Right this way." Inside the cramped, windowless office, Sterling sat behind his desk, preparing his arsenal of apologies, complimentary desserts, and comped meals. "Sir, on behalf of the Gilded Cage, I deeply apologize if your steak was not prepared to your—" "Stop talking!" Elias cut him off. The words were not a request. Sterling's mouth snapped shut. Elias remained standing, a coiled spring of potential energy in the small room. He looked at the man behind the desk, a man who had built a career on enforcing a system of quiet bigotry, and he felt nothing but a cold, profound contempt. "I want to see the footage from your kitchen security cameras," Elias said, "from the last 30 minutes. Sterling blinked, thrown off balance. The cameras, sir, that's highly unusual. They're for internal security purposes, for inventory and—" "I'm not asking you if it's unusual. I'm telling you to show them to me." A flicker of panic crossed Sterling's face. He knew Chef Antoine's reputation. He knew what probably happened in that kitchen. His instinct was to lie, to deflect. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. The system, it automatically overwrites the footage. We may not have access to—" Elias took a slow step toward the desk, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. The illusion of the man in the hoodie evaporated, replaced by something formidable and dangerous. "Let me be very clear with you, Mr. Sterling. You have two options. Option 1, you show me the raw, unedited footage right now, and you might be able to position yourself as an employee who helped uncover a problem. Option 2. You continue to lie to my face, and I will personally ensure that by the time the sun rises, the only thing you'll be managing is your own unemployment claim. And trust me, the litigation that follows will be the least of your worries. Sterling paled, sweat beading on his forehead. The man's sudden transformation was terrifying. Who the hell are you?" he stammered. Elias leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the polished desk. He looked directly into Sterling's eyes, and for the first time that night, he let the full, immense weight of his power show. "My name is Elias Vance. I'm the founder and CEO of Vance Capital. 6 months ago, my firm acquired a controlling interest in the hospitality group that owns this restaurant. So, to answer your question, Mr. Sterling, I'm the man who owns your chair, your desk, your building, and your paycheck. I am your boss. Now, are we going to watch that footage, or do I need to make a phone call?" The color drained completely from Sterling's face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He fumbled with his keyboard, his hands shaking. He clicked through files, his confident demeanor shattered into a million pieces. It's right here, Mr. Vance," he mumbled, turning the monitor. The footage flickered to life. The kitchen. Chef Antoine. The steak. And then, right at the crucial moment, the video jumped. A 2-minute gap. A clean, deliberate deletion. Sterling started to stammer out another excuse. "See, like I said, the system glitches sometimes." "Enough," Elias said, his voice like ice. He pulled out a sleek burner phone, a device he used only for these undercover operations. He typed a quick, encrypted message to the head of his personal security team, a former Mossad agent named Jacob. Code Black. The Gilded Cage, Savannah. Kitchen incident. Local footage compromised. Pull raw data from cloud backup. Timestamp 2130 to 2145 EST. Isolate Chef Antoine and Manager Sterling. I want their full employee files, social media, everything, and find the waitress who took my order. Her name is Isabella Flores. Protect her. Full report in 1 hour. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned his gaze back to the trembling man behind the desk. "You've made your choice, Mr. Sterling. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Have security escort you off the premises. Do not speak to anyone. You'll be hearing from my legal team." Sterling just stared, his career and life crumbling around him in a tiny, windowless office. He had mistaken a lion for a lamb, and now he was about to be devoured. Elias walked out of the office, leaving the man to his fate, his mind already 3 steps ahead, planning the controlled demolition and reconstruction of the Gilded Cage. The game was over. The reckoning had just begun. Back in his suite at a different hotel, one he also owned, Elias didn't sleep. He sat in front of his laptop, the encrypted file from his security team open on the screen. Jacob had been thorough. The cloud backup was pristine, untouched. Elias hit play. He watched in crystal clear high definition as Chef Antoine spat on the steak. He watched him rub the wine glass against his crotch. He heard the muffled, racist slurs through the kitchen microphone. He saw the complicit laughter of the other staff. He felt the cold rage settle into a hard, dense knot in his stomach. Jacob's report was even more damning. This wasn't an isolated incident. A deep dive into employee text messages and social media, legally obtained through company-owned devices, revealed a cesspool of racism and bigotry. There were jokes about special ingredients for Black and Hispanic customers. There were memes mocking Asian tourists. Chef Antoine had a private Instagram account filled with Confederate flags and white supremacist dog whistles. Mr. Sterling was part of a private Facebook group that lamented the decline of Southern heritage. This wasn't just a few bad apples. The entire orchard was poisoned from the roots up. And then there was the file on Isabella Flores, a promising journalism student, dropped out to care for her injured father. Clean record. No history of complaints. She was just a good person trapped in a vile system. A hero hiding in plain sight. Elias closed the laptop. For a moment, he let the weight of it all wash over him. The endless, exhausting fight. The constant need to prove his worth, his humanity, in a world that was always looking for a reason to diminish him. But the exhaustion quickly burned away, replaced by a diamond-hard resolve. They had not spit on a stake. They had spit on his father's memory. They had spit on every black man and woman who had ever been told they didn't belong. And Elias Vance was going to make them drown in it. The next day, at precisely 12:30 p.m., during the peak of the bustling lunch service, the elegant world of the Gilded Cage came to a violent, screeching halt. 4 plainclothes detectives from the Savannah Police Department, accompanied by an agent from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, walked through the front doors. They didn't flash sirens or draw weapons. Their movements were quiet, professional, and absolutely terrifying. They walked straight past the stunned hostess and into the kitchen. Chef Antoine was dragged out first, his face a mixture of confusion and outrage, his white chef's coat stained with sauce. The sous chef was next. Mr. Sterling, who had foolishly shown up for work hoping it was all a bad dream, was arrested in his office. The patrons, mouths agape, watched in stunned silence as these men were cuffed and led out the front doors, the flash of cameras from the waiting press corps illuminating their walk of shame. Elias had made one phone call to the district attorney, providing him with a mountain of irrefutable, criminally prosecutable evidence of health code violations, conspiracy, and potential hate crimes. As the police cars pulled away, Elias Vance stepped out of a black SUV. He was no longer in a hoodie. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and an air of absolute authority. He walked to a podium that his PR team had set up on the restaurant's front steps. He faced the news cameras, his expression grim and resolute. "Yesterday I came to this restaurant as a customer," he began, his voice clear and strong, carrying over the stunned silence. "Today I stand before you as its owner, and I am here to tell you that the Gilded Cage is closed. What I discovered within these walls was not a simple failure of service. It was a failure of humanity. It was a culture of racism and disrespect that was allowed to fester in darkness. That darkness stops today." He paused, letting the words sink in. "There are some who will say this is a case of a few bad apples. They are wrong. This was a diseased tree, and its roots ran deep. And so we will not be pruning the branches. We will be ripping it out of the ground and planting something new in its place." He then turned and gestured to his side. Izzy Flores stood there, looking terrified but resolute. Elias had sent a car for her that morning, explaining everything, offering her not just protection but a new role. She was wearing a simple but elegant dress his assistant had provided. She looked like the journalist she was always meant to be. This bravery, this change, would not have been possible without one person, Elias continued, his voice softening with genuine respect. "This is Isabella Flores. She is a server who had every reason to stay silent, to protect her job, to look the other way. But she chose to speak the truth. She risked everything, not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. She is the embodiment of integrity, and she will be instrumental in helping us build what comes next." The cameras swiveled to Izzy. She didn't smile, she just stood tall, a silent testament to the power of a single courageous act. Elias concluded the press conference. "This building will be shuttered. When it reopens, it will have a new name, a new mission, and a new leadership. It will be a place that celebrates the true heritage of this city, a heritage of all its people. It will be a place that serves not just fine food, but justice, dignity, and respect. This I promise you. What do you think of that for a response? A man who not only exposes the rot, but uses his immense power to promise a complete rebirth. It gives you hope, doesn't it? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in Elias's position. And please, if this story is hitting you in the gut, share it. These are the conversations we need to be having. In the months that followed, Elias was true to his word. The gilded cage was gutted, literally and figuratively. The oil paintings of slave owners were taken down and donated to a historical society for a new exhibit on the city's complicated past. They were replaced with vibrant works by local Black and Hispanic artists. The name was changed to the Keystone, a symbol of something essential that holds everything else together. Izzy Flores was named the new Director of Community and Integrity. Her first act was not to write a new employee handbook, but to hold open forums with every single staff member, from the dishwashers to the sommeliers. She listened to their stories, their fears, their ideas. She implemented a truly anonymous reporting system, rigorous and mandatory anti-bias training designed by leading sociologists, and a new profit-sharing model that ensured every employee, not just the front-of-house staff, benefited from the restaurant's success. She hired a new head chef, a brilliant Black woman from Atlanta, whose food was a celebration of multicultural Southern history. Elias also set up a fully funded scholarship in her name at the University of Georgia's School of Journalism for students from underprivileged backgrounds who wanted to pursue investigative reporting. Izzy re-enrolled, taking classes online, her tuition paid in full. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a director, a student, and a catalyst for change. She was finally telling the stories that mattered, starting with her own. This isn't just a story about a racist chef or a corrupt manager. It's a story about the systems that protect them, the silence that enables them, and the incredible power of one person's refusal to be silent any longer. A cocktail napkin, a few scribbled words, and a world of courage. That's all it took to bring an empire of hate to its knees and build something beautiful from the ashes. It reminds us that power isn't just about having money or a title. True power is seeing an injustice, no matter how small, and having the integrity to do something about it. Elias had the power to punish. He chose to rebuild. Izzy had the power to stay safe. She chose to be brave. So I'll leave you with this question. What injustices, big or small, are you silent about in your own life? In your workplace, in your community, in your family? What truth is waiting for you to write it on a napkin? If this story resonated with you, if it sparked something in you, please honor Izzy's courage by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. We're dedicated to telling the true, unfiltered stories of the heroes you've never heard of, the ones who prove that sometimes the quietest voice can make the loudest noise. Thank you for listening.